We all studied a little history in school, and while some of us actually took an interest in it and paid attention, there were others who weren't as interested or as attentive as the rest of us. If you're one of those people, then this video is for you. A little history won't kill you, trust me. Welcome back to Told You Another Story channel. In this video, we will be looking at the story of the 555th Triple Nickles. The Second World War was a very dark time in human history, running from 1939 to 1945. It was considered a global war and has involved several countries forming two major alliances, the Axis and the Allies powers. If you're a fan of history or planes, then you should stick around for more. The major participants of the Second World War threw their full industrial, scientific, and economic capabilities behind the war effort, and one could hardly tell the difference between civilian and military resources. Aircraft was an important part of this worldwide conflict, as it allowed countries to perform strategic bombing of population centers and make use of nuclear weapons in war. The causes of the Second World War are often disputed these days, but certain factors did contribute to the start of the war. This included the rising European tensions since World War I, the Spanish Civil War, the Second Italo-Ethiopian War, the Soviet-Japanese border conflicts, the Second Sino-Japanese War, and the rise of fascism in Europe. While all these are considered contributing factors, a lot of people still just settle on the idea that Germany started the whole thing. Regardless, there is no doubt that World War II was a terrible war. It was even considered the deadliest conflict in human history based on the number of lives lost during the period. It resulted in about 70 to 85 million fatalities, mostly among civilians. Millions of people died due to genocides, massacres, disease, and starvation. It was indeed a terrible time to be alive, but that isn't what this video is all about. While the topic for discussion does share a relation to the Second World War, it does stand as a piece of history that has been forgotten. Stories like these are the reason we make these videos, as history is filled with amazing tales that shouldn't be swept under the rug of time so easily. The Airborne unit was one of the major parts of the United States Army during the Second World War. The Airborne units are ground combat units transported by aircraft and dropped into battle zones from the sky, typically by air assault or parachute drop. The parachute-qualified infantry and the support personnel that serve in airborne units are also referred to as paratroopers. The main benefit of these airborne units is being able to deploy them into active combat zones with no need for land passage, provided that the airspace is accessible. The formations of these airborne units are limited by the size and number of their transport aircraft. That said, a considerable force can appear from the skies and behind enemy lines in just hours, if not minutes. However, airborne units usually lack adequate supplies for lengthy combat, so they are employed to establish an airhead to bring in larger forces before executing other combat objectives. This was probably the idea running through the United States Army's mind when they created the 555th Parachute Infantry Battalion. This unit was created in a time of segregation and was an all-black airborne unit of the U.S. Army during the Second World War. This unit was mostly known by its nickname, the Triple Nickles. This all-black airborne unit was activated because of a recommendation by the Advisory Committee of Negro Troop Policies in December 1942. A committee headed by the Assistant Secretary of War, John J. McCloy. To approve the Advisory Committee's recommendation for an all-black parachute battalion, the Chief of Staff, General George C. Marshall, chose to start with one company. And on February 25, 1943, the 555th Parachute Infantry Company was established. I'm sure you're probably wondering why the 555th Parachute Infantry Company was created in the middle of the Second World War. Just relax, as we will get to the reasons in due time. 10 months later, on December 19, 1943, the U.S. Army Headquarters Army Ground Forces approved the activation of the 555th Parachute Infantry Company as an all-black airborne unit with African-American officers and enlisted men. All the unit members were expected to be volunteers, with an enlisted squad to be chosen from the personnel of the 92nd Infantry Division, an African-American infantry division of the U.S. Army at Fort Huachuca, Arizona. The 555th Parachute Infantry Company was formally activated on December 30, 1943, at Fort Benning, Georgia, and after many months of training, this airborne unit moved to Camp MACKALL, North Carolina, where it was reorganized and redesignated. However, the battalion didn't serve overseas during the Second World War, mainly because it never reached the full strength of an airborne infantry battalion. In response to the German counterattack that started the Battle of Bulge, the Airborne Command considered reorganizing the 555th Parachute Infantry Battalion as a single reinforced airborne rifle company and transporting it to Europe to strengthen the battered airborne units already there. However, before their deployment could happen, the predicament had passed, and the 555th Parachute Infantry Battalion was deployed instead to the West Coast. The men of the 555th Parachute Infantry Battalion hoped they would be employed in the war against the Japanese, but unfortunately, that was not their next mission. Sergeant Walter Morris stated, "It was a secret mission called Operation Firefly. We thought we were going overseas to General Douglas MacArthur's theater. It wasn't until they landed in Oregon in May 1945 that they discovered they would be fighting the Japanese on the fire line in the western United States. During the winter of 1944 to 45, the Japanese deployed 9,300 Fugo balloon bombs to North America. It was believed that 1,000 succeeded in getting to the United States, and 312 balloon bombs have been found. After 3 days, each balloon dropped an incendiary bomb, after which a single high-explosive bomb was dropped, followed by a self-destruct device. In order to hide the effectiveness of these attacks, the 555th Parachute Infantry Battalion's missions were kept covert in nature. There were some small wildfires that developed when some of the balloon bombs were detonated suddenly after landing in the forests, mainly in California, Oregon, or Idaho. The unit members stationed at Pendleton Field, Oregon, and a detachment in Chico, California, joined in firefighting missions all over the Pacific Northwest throughout the summer and fall of 1945. This airborne unit worked on 28 fires during the 1945 season, of which 15 were jumped or parachuted to. The 555th Parachute Infantry Battalion got the nickname the Triple Nickles based on its numerical designation and the selection of 17 of the original 20 members, colored test platoon from the 92nd Infantry Division. This was also the origin of the nickname Buffalo Nickles. The identifying symbol is the image of 3 buffalo nickels joined in a triangle or pyramid. The 555th Parachute Infantry Battalion returned to Camp MACKALL in October 1945 and was soon transferred to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, which served as its home for the next 2 years. During that period, they were joined with the elite 82nd Airborne Division when the battalion was inactivated on December 15, 1947. Its members were all transferred into the 3rd Battalion, 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment of the 82nd Airborne Division, which had been reduced to unit strength to prepare for their arrival. Also on the same date, the 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment was designated as the 505th Airborne Infantry Regiment. Afterwards, individual African American paratroopers were transferred to units all over the 82nd Airborne Division, and it became the first integrated division in the U.S. Army. The 555th Parachute Infantry Battalion was formally disbanded on August 22, 1950, after its inactivation. Many of its former members later fought in the Korean War as part of other units. In 1950, a huge number of former 555th Parachute Infantry Battalion members volunteered to form the all-black 2nd Airborne Ranger Infantry Company. While attached to the 187th Airborne Regimental Combat Team, the 2nd Ranger Infantry Company made the combat jump at Munsan-ni in March 1951. This was recorded as the first combat jump ever made by a U.S. Army Ranger unit, as well as the only combat jump ever made by an all-black unit, as the United States Army was racially segregated at the time. President Harry Truman had ordered the U.S. military to be desegregated on July 26, 1948. However, the Army was slow to comply with the order. The last all-black unit was disbanded in 1954. That said, a lot of books and series have depicted the 555th Parachute Infantry Battalion, and while they might be a part of history, it's nice to know that they aren't forgotten. Thank you for watching this video. Hit us up in the comments section and give us a thumbs up if you liked the video. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more videos.